Hello. Today I'd like to talk about gun shops. And there's really two main types. There's the big box or chain brands, and then there's the small, what you could call a mom and pop shop, the privately held small business. And I want to talk about why the small ones are better, but I'd like to also point out some of the good points that you may find at a large national chain. So, when you go to a large national chain, you will see a lot of people buying their first guns, and that's a big reason that a lot of people go there. In what I have seen, you'll see a lot of people there getting their first hunting gun, or they're easy to find. The advertisements are large, the storefronts are large, everyone knows where it is. Whereas with your smaller stores, sometimes they're hidden, sometimes they have odd hours. I know of one that's open 3 hours a day, you know, 5 to 8, 3 days a week. I know some that open on Wednesday and close on Saturday. So availability of hours is definitely a reason to go to a large chain. The other reason why you may go to a large chain is they will always have something, but generally not the wide variety that you'll see in other places, and they're generally not as helpful or knowledgeable. Now there are definitely some out there that are different. I remember years and years ago there was a certain national chain that I used to frequent. There was a gentleman that worked the gun counter there. He'd been there for 30 years. He knew everything. But on the whole, you're going to get better results and better information from a smaller place. So, amongst other reasons to frequent the smaller gun shops, they're small businesses, which we all should help support. It means the money stays more local, you get more local service, it's just better in general. The reason that I like to frequent the small gun stores is I like odd and novel and interesting, and I find with the large chains, mostly what you're going to get is what's cool at the time. You're going to see a lot of Glocks, you're going to see a lot of 1911s. Right now, you're going to see a plethora of single action 22s, whatever is the big thing. Whereas in a small place, you'll get orders, you'll get interesting, you'll get trade-ins, you'll get, estates that are being sold. And sometimes you'll just find very strange things. And like I said, for me, that's a big deal. If you're looking for better customer service, once again, I suggest the small places, because the fact of the matter is, when you're that small, if you get a bad reputation, you're not going to last. Whereas a large sporting goods store, well, if their gun sales are terrible, it can be made up in the clothing sales or in the boat sales, etc. And another great thing that you'll find in the small gun shops is you'll end up knowing everyone, because they're so small and you get a lot of regular customers. You get to see a lot of the same faces. You get to ask a lot of questions. You're thinking about getting a gun, and yeah, sure, the store owner may own one, but more than likely someone walking through has probably laid hands on it. Whereas in a large box store, generally the guys behind the counter, they may own a few firearms, but they're not the same as the other ones. Another one is the availability of items. In my experience, at the large national chains, when you walk in, if they don't have something for you, they usually can't get it for you. And I understand that's not necessarily the person behind the counter's fault, but that does make it difficult. Whereas once again, in my experience, the gun shops that I frequent, if they don't have something for me, they can usually find it, and that is a big plus. What one example was, I called a guy at a local gun shop one time and said, "Hey, I can't find 380 ACP anywhere." He said, "Hey, I think I got a box coming in tomorrow. Come and see me tomorrow night, and I'll set aside a couple for you." And I said, "Great, that's fantastic." Another thing is price point. Now, I'm not going to say this is always the case, because there are some small stores I know that charge exorbitant amounts, and I do not frequent them. But on the general, you're going to find at your small stores, you're going to get a lower price point. And that just is what it is. And I don't know exactly why that is, but that's what it is. So to give an example of, firearms and sales, and why I really like the small gun stores, I was looking for a Beretta one day, and I went to a large national chain, because the gun store that I usually did business with in that area didn't have one. And I knew there was one at this large chain. I went there, and They were just awful. I did not enjoy them, so I didn't buy from them. So I went down to my local store, decided I would just have him order one. And when I got there, I said, "Hey, Paul, can you order me one of these?" And he said, "Before I do that, how about you take a look at this?" And then he showed me probably the best full-size 9mm pistol that I've ever laid hands on. I fell in love with it immediately. I bought it. That was years ago, and I've never looked back. It is the greatest piece ever, and I'll show it to you now, just as an example. This is the CZ75 SPO1. It is my favorite full-frame pistol. I love this thing to death. And had I not gone to that small store, I probably would have wandered around until I found a Beretta, which was what I was looking for, but this is so much better in my opinion, and I am so thankful I found it for a multitude of reasons. So that's just an example of why you would want to go to a small store. They may not have exactly what you're looking for, but he pointed this out to me because he knew exactly what I wanted in a firearm, and I fell in love with it. So that's another plus on their side. Also, we're going to do a video on this sometime soon. I know a lot of people have done it. I've owned this for quite a few years now, and I just love to show people why I like them. And with CZ coming into the country, there are going to be more of them. Another example of why sometimes small gun shops are good is one day I walked into a gun shop, just wandering around, you know, picking up some ammunition, normal stuff. And in the back, in the corner, in the dark, was this moldy, ratty looking holster with a wooden grip poking out of it. And it was a square back, and I said, interesting. So I asked the guy, "Hey, can I take a look at that?" And he honestly didn't even know it was there. He'd forgotten about it. So he pulls out this ratty old leather covered thing. The leather's falling apart. The gun clearly hasn't been cleaned. And we find out that it had come in commission and just never gotten sold. And yeah, it could have been a bust, but I paid a reasonable amount for it. And when I got it home and cleaned it up, I ended up with this. This is a Smith & Wesson 15.4 in 38 Special. And once again, the problem was it just hadn't been cleaned, and everyone had forgotten about it. And had I not just wandered in and taken a look, I never would have found it. And at the time, I was looking for a snub-nosed revolver. And you will find little things like that at those local gun shops, you know. And not only that, but because I had built up such a repertoire with that gentleman, he ended up handing me these. These are Safari-Land speed loaders. And once again, he cut me a great deal. They're fantastic. If you like to do quick reloading, they're great, you know. So that's one of the things that happens when you frequent a small place. You get to know someone, and you get to know what they have and what they don't have. And that's just a great example of a find that I never would have gotten had I not just wandered into a local gun shop, because you're not going to see stuff like this usually in a large chain store. The other thing that I like about the small stores is the ones that I frequent, they're run by people who are professional shooters or hunters. And that can make a real difference. You know, if you want to get into competition shooting, you may find someone at a large chain, but I can almost guarantee you that if someone behind the counter at a small place isn't a competition shooter, one of their regulars is. So if you have questions, you can really get some good answers. They'll also introduce you to new things, because sometimes their vendors say, "Hey, try this," and they pass it off to us to try it out, and it's fantastic. It's just a lot of fun. And like I said, especially if you look for, you know, one day I walked into a gun shop just because I like going there, and on the table was a whole bunch of never been shot Makarovs. I'd seen a couple here and there, but I'd never seen a table full. And you could see all the different makes. It was someone who had collected and died, and it was being sold there. So if you like interesting and novel, or just, you know, neat finds, it's a much better place to go. And this is not me really trying to rag on the big box stores, because a lot of people buy their first firearms there. I know I've bought that one there. I know lots of people who have. But I generally find that in the small shops, you're going to find more interesting stuff, and you're going to get better service. You know, and to put it in perspective, sometimes there's fun. For instance, I knew a place up north was called Bob's Guns, Guitars, and Groceries. And they literally sold guns, guitars, and groceries. So it can be interesting. The downsides on the small shops are they don't have the hours that a big box store does. And that really can be a struggle. But I've also found that doing paperwork, like for background checks and everything, that can be a lot easier, and it's just a general nicer experience. So those are just some of the things that I've run into over the years of buying firearms, and why I really prefer the small hole in the wall places, because you never know what you're going to find, and sometimes you just find a great person that you end up being friends with. So thank you for listening. If you have any questions, or if you've had different experiences, please leave it in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. So thank you.